he's been one of the most efficient, I feel, pass protectors in the game, really for a long, long time now. Houston lets him go to the Commanders for it's sort of a lot to follow here. So the Texans traded Laremy Tunsil and a 4th-round pick this year. So Tunsil and a 4th-round pick go to the Commanders in exchange for a 3rd-round pick this year, a 7th-round pick this year, a 2nd-round pick next year, and a 4th-round pick next year. So all in all, essentially this deal is a little bit of a pick swap there in this year's draft, going from the 4th round to the 3rd round. This for the Texans. And then you get an additional 7th-round pick, you get an additional 2nd-round pick next year, and you get an additional 4th-round pick next year. So it's a good price for Laremy Tunsil going over, and I think a lot of people go, whoa, hold on. Stroud was running for his life last year, and now you're going to get rid of his best offensive lineman and their left tackle in Tunsil. After that move was made, we sort of heard some rumblings that, maybe Tunsil wasn't quite the leader of the O-line room that they wanted him to be. Sounds like they kind of wanted to just turn the page and get a little bit younger on the offensive line anyways. Dalton, what are your thoughts on the Texans even being willing to move on from Laremy Tunsil, the trade compensation, and then a little bit of maybe the reason why of how we got here with the Houston Texans? What do you think?
I think this is a massive, massive win for the Commanders. You got a potential all-pro level left tackle, the 2nd highest graded pass blocking tackle over the last 6 years, 4th highest graded tackle in pass protection this season. You got him without giving up either of your first 2 picks in this year's draft. You essentially did a pick swap that moves you down roughly 50 spots from the 3rd into the 4th round. And basically, you have the swap, and out of this year's draft, you're giving up a 7th-round pick. Obviously, the 2026 picks are what they are, but the Commanders expect to contend again. That might not hurt you as much as you might think. I think it's fantastic for the Commanders. I know it's a pretty decent return, especially when it comes to 2026 for the Texans, but I think this is pretty lopsided. I don't know, obviously what goes on with Tunsil behind the scenes in the Texans locker room or what have you, but the fact that the Commanders now get that level of player going into his age 31 season to protect their young quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and really give you an anchor on that offensive line that they were missing. They were 22nd in pass blocking grade this year, and it was getting worse as the season went on, and they dealt with injuries. And even, obviously, we know Sam Cosmi got hurt in the postseason and could miss a good amount or all of this next year. So I think it's a game-changing move for Washington. You look at the additions on their offense now of Laremy Tunsil, you look at Deebo Samuel, maybe they could use one more weapon, maybe they delve in for some running back depth in the draft, but I don't know how you couldn't like this for Washington. And as far as the Texans go, you have to be legitimately worried about this for C.J. Stroud, right? I mean, the 1+ pass protector they had up front is now gone, and there's no immediate thought on a replacement for him. I mean, we have to assume now for the next 6 weeks, every single mock draft we do is going to have the Texans taking a left tackle, right?
Yeah, and I think that they could get aggressive for one.
Right? They certainly could. They have more capital to work with now, so if they wanted to move up, where are they at now? 25. If they wanted to move up 10, 12, 15 spots to go get one of the top 3 guys I think about when you think about Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and Armand Membu, they may have to make a move like that, right? If they dip into that high second tier for a Josh Simmons or Josh Connerly, look, I like those players, but you're talking about Laremy Tunsil. You're talking about a top 5 pass protector in the entire league. It's going to be a downgrade when you think about what Tunsil gave them already. And you're already talking about the other 4 spots where a struggle in pass protection, especially the interior. I'm very, very worried about this for Houston's offense, both in the passing game and even in the run game, where Tunsil had the highest run blocking grade of his career this year. So there must have really been something going on behind the scenes with this, or he wanted an extension, and it's like we've seen with several other guys around the league, and the Texans just weren't willing or maybe weren't able to pay it because their salary cap situation isn't great. But I think it's a massive win for the Commanders. The fact that they keep both their 1st and 2nd round pick this year, they only lose a net of 1 draft pick this year. They've got the Commanders have some serious potential, man. If they can get a few more pieces on this defense, I think that's where the focus is going to be in the draft, unless there's a receiver that they really like early on that's still available to them. But they just keep getting it right. Obviously, we talked about the puzzling Javon Kinlaw signing, but outside of that, especially on offense, the Commanders are in a really, really good spot to compete next year.
Yeah, Walt's asking how much does Tunsil saving the Texans in cap space by just looking it up at over the cap. If you select him being traded before June 1st, it does give them a cap saving of $21 million. So it gives them a little bit extra to work with. And like you said, it gives them those extra draft picks. So it's sort of tough to look at this trade from the Texans' perspective and be okay with it unless you really believe that this was sort of like a culture and a locker room thing, which we have heard reports of people who are, in Houston and covering that team. Lance Zierlein is one of them who he does a good job, like being based out of Houston and knowing that team really well. He's like, look, I'm not surprised by this. I'm not surprised by this at all because we've sort of heard rumblings. Now, when you look at just straight up production, pass blocking grades last season, Laremy Tunsil, 89.1 for this offensive line. And then you got Titus Howard at 74.9. Then it's Shaq Mason at 63.6. Juice Scruggs is 62.1. Jared Patterson, 69.9. And then Kenyon Green, a 39.7. Blake Fisher, a 46.7. And then Kendrick Green, a 19.4. So there's no doubt about it that Laremy Tunsil was the best pass protector on this team. And they're going to have to do something drastic. And I agree. I think we should now be looking at Houston as a team that's going to get really aggressive to go up and get an offensive lineman. Because here's the thing. If you're moving on from Laremy Tunsil, you're not just drafting an offensive lineman, right? Like, that's not what's going to happen here. You're going to draft the offensive lineman that you want, or else this doesn't make any sense. Because if you were going to roll the dice on a player, you would have rolled the dice on a player who's already over the last 10 years proven that he's been one of the best pass protectors in the league at left tackle. You can't just say, well, yeah, we need an offensive tackle. Let's just sit at 25 and, maybe somebody will fall to us. Josh Connerly fell to us. Yeah, that's okay. We're fine with that. You bet. What I think the Texans are going to do in the draft now is they're going to go, we want to come out of this with Armand Membou or Josh Simmons. And I'm throwing out two names just as an example. They've done the interview process. Those guys fit the talent ceiling that they want to be worthy of a first-round pick to be able to start at left tackle for them. And also the character. The locker room character, being somebody that they can invest in. That's the only way that this makes sense for the Texans. Because if not, you are playing with fire about an offensive line for a stud young quarterback who is now about halfway through his rookie deal. So to me, there is a world where this works out for the Texans, but you are playing with fire here of what you need to do next. And I think that they acquired a lot of draft to make them pretty flexible to go up and get whoever they want there.